Ah, hot takes. The intellectual agreement that we can make predictions, and if we get them right, we look like a genius. And if we get them wrong, no one cares, which is all well and good. I asked you guys in my community tab to drop your finals hot takes. I've got some of the ones that were posted at the time of recording, so if I've missed yours, I apologize. I went and also grabbed a handful of my favorites when I asked this question on Reddit this morning at the time of recording. So let's get into it. I'm just going to give you my initial thoughts on each one. So let's go. I feel like saying Adelaide straight sets isn't too big of a hot take, so we're going to see a cute clash final, whether it's in a semi or a prelim. I don't know where this whole Adelaide straight sets is a hot take kind of thing comes from, because you're still saying that the minor premier is going to shit the bed. And even in this scenario, even if you're not as big a believer in the Crows because of maybe historical reasons or anything like that, you're saying that they're going to lose to a club that they beat only 4 weeks ago. Now, given how tight that game was and some mitigating factors on both ends that could make you think the result could be swayed, they have played the Giants and the Hawks at home this year and dealt with them in a pretty good and mature way. Now, you are relying on the fact that GWS, Hawthorn, and Collingwood have got finals experience in the last 24 months that just the Crows don't have. I get where you're coming from, but of the 4 teams that could go out in straight sets, Adelaide are definitely not number 1 on the podium there for me. Definitely, but I still think that is a hot take itself. However, the Q Clash final now, off the top of my head, that would have to mean that Brisbane would have to lose to Geelong and then Gold Coast would have to beat Freo. I think at worst, only one of those things happen. Brisbane-Geelong for me is just a coin flip in my eyes, but I am pretty confident in Freo beating the Suns. Could come back to bite me on the ass, but that's what I think. So I'm going to disagree on both of those opinions, even though one of them that you don't think is a hot take actually should be a hot take. Does that make sense? I don't think so, but that's what I think. Back-to-back non-Victorian grand finals, but this time it'll be a weird matchup between GWS and Adelaide. A lot of neutrals wouldn't be pulled in either direction. I would be pulled in the Adelaide direction. Now, I do bring this up as an interesting point because as a Hawthorn fan, if we did lose to the Giants, my partner actually asked me a couple days ago, if you played in a prelim, which of course is not the GWS example, but I'm going to relate it to your take here, is that would you barrack for the team that knocks you out of the final? So if Hawthorn GWS was a prelim, right? And it doesn't matter who GWS was playing, but would I want the Giants to win or the other team? And for me, I would want the Giants to win. I would look back and go, okay, we lost to the best team in it rather than having the what if. That's just my take on it. I don't know whether that's a common opinion or not, but that's where I stand on it. But if GWS played Adelaide, because the GWS Giants, of course, would have had to go through the Hawks, there would be that thing of like, well, they were the best team in it. They caught lightning in a bottle, if you will. So happy with that. 5th won it last year, 5th wins it this year. That's fine. But I was the first one to be on the Adelaide bandwagon. Granted, it was last season when I got it horrifically wrong, but I wasn't wrong. I was early. But if GWS played Adelaide, I could totally understand the Giants winning the first flag thing history. That would be awesome. But I'm not jumping off the Crows bandwagon now. Like, if the Hawks don't win it, I am pulling for the Crows. Brisbane, Geelong, and Collingwood have all had success, of course, the last 3 teams to win it. Yes, the Giants, it would be really cool to see. Freo would be really cool to see. Gold Coast, obviously. And, of course, the Hawks would be my number 1 there. But considering the Crows would probably be my number 2 and the Giants would probably be my number 3, I would get pulled in the Adelaide direction. That's just my take. Geelong losing in straight sets would be interesting. Now, I'm not going to deny that. It would be interesting. You haven't fully committed to the hot take bit here, but I'm going to go with it anyway. Of course, this means that they would have to lose to Brisbane. Could I see that happening? Yeah, I could. I think that would probably be 4 times out of 10. I think Brisbane would get the job done there. That's just my take on it. Although Brisbane did beat them at GMHBA Stadium, of course. That feels like ages ago. I know it was before my daughter was born. A while ago. And they killed them. So I'm not saying that in a negative way towards Brisbane. Absolutely not. Of course, beat them in the prelim in the G last year. So I promise you I'm not being disrespectful. Neither result would shock me. Let's just go with that. But then again, you're of course relying on them losing to either Freo or Gold Coast. If Gold Coast win, they're playing with house money, which they pretty much are anyway. But Freo's record on the road has been really solid this year. They're 7-3 against other teams in the top, 9 if you want to include the Bulldogs in that discussion. So it would be interesting if they did. I think it's on the table. I think that there is no way Gold Coast could do it. I think there is a chance, maybe 3 out of every 10 times, Freo would get them. And that is good enough in a one-off game. So that's not a disrespectful thing at all. So would be interesting, you're correct, which is not really how hot takes work, but would it be a disastrous plot twist? Like, no, I think it is pretty open. I think nearly anyone could drop out in straight sets. And speaking of that opinion, Collingwood and Brisbane out in straight sets. And I know that I'm going through the machinations here a lot, guys, but again, you are relying on Brisbane and then losing to Geelong and then somehow losing to Freo or Gold Coast. Now, that Q Clash semi, which was brought up earlier, would be really interesting to see. I would probably say out of the four teams that Brisbane would be the least likely to drop out in straight sets, to be honest. So I'm going to disagree with you on that one. The Collingwood one, again, can make somewhat sense. Losing to Adelaide, would that be a shock? Not really. GWS and Hawthorn have both smacked them at points this year, and considering that they would be going in with like a 3-6 record in their last 9, if they ended up dropping that qualifying final, that is absolutely on the cards. But if I was to rank it, because this will be the last time I bring it up, the order of clubs that I think would be most to least likely to drop out in straight sets would probably go Brisbane, Adelaide, Geelong, Collingwood, to be honest, or Brisbane, Geelong, Adelaide, Collingwood, depending on that Freo Gold Coast game, in all honesty. But no, I'm pretty confident that it would be like Brisbane would be the least likely, then Adelaide, then Geelong, and then Collingwood. So I like the fact you've included both. Good hot take. The Hawks make it to a prelim final only to lose to Brisbane in Brisbane after Brisbane beat Geelong. I'm probably going to go on the assumption here that you mean that the Hawks would face the Pies. I'm not convinced. I know it happened last year, we nearly got over the line, but I just don't think that we are good enough to beat the Crows over there in a final. Again, you are talking about the team that is on top of the ladder here, guys. It would be an amazing result, don't get me wrong, but if you're saying to me, Daz, who would you rather play in a semi? Give me Collingwood 9 times out of 10. That's just where I stand on that. But yeah, I think this would be it would be a pass mark for the season. You go up to the Giants, beat them. You either beat the top of the table team on their home deck as the 8th place side, or you beat Collingwood again. Of course, that's going to be a massive tick. And then, circa 2001, you're up against last year's premiers and you get the job done against you. Yeah, you'd have to live with that, somehow, some way. So yeah. Hot take, maybe, I suppose. Realistic, somewhat, yeah. Collingwood will not go out in straight sets. It is kind of crazy how we live in a world where a top 4 team winning a final is deemed as hot take-ish. And again, I can understand that this is only a hot take because of A, Collingwood's form, and B, the amount that people are jumping off them. Again, would it surprise me if Collingwood won a final? No, it wouldn't. It shouldn't surprise anyone else either, to be honest. Crows win 3 games and Alex Neil-Bullen wins the Norm Smith. This is the hot take that we love here. Now, the former Demon supporter getting on the bandwagon of the former D in A and B himself, which is great to see. Absolutely great to see. I love the pick in terms of Alex Neil-Bullen because he is kind of that off-Broadway guy that could win a Norm Smith. Like, you look at Isaac Smith, Bobby Hill, even Will Ashcroft, who wouldn't be the guys you would pick in that scenario. I know Ashcroft was decent value in the Norm Smith medal count, but Bobby Hill was $41 the day before. I think Isaac Smith was $21 or something like that during grand final week. I remember that story going around. So, and then Petrarca was a relatively easy one if you were on the Melbourne bandwagon. Dusty, the 3 times that he won it. Luke Shuey, I feel, for the Eagles with no Natanui gaff there, would have been one of the early favourites as well. So, you're looking at some obvious ones pre-recent history, I suppose. Jason Johannesson would not have been, the guy that you would have picked before the game. He would have been the guy to pick during the game, to be honest. But that's a whole nother rant. But I love the obscurity, sort of, with the A and B pick here. Could he be a guy that explodes? Yeah, he could. To be honest, he really could. If the Crows win the 3 games, of course, that would mean that Rankin is not there. So outside of a Jordan Dawson or maybe one of the tall forwards you think might go nuts, yeah, an offensive weapon. I think if the Crows were to make the granny and were to win it, and you're telling me an offensive threat would win the Norm Smith, I'd probably go down the Ben Keys path. That's just me. GWS are making the granny. Hell yeah, dude. I like this a lot. So again, how would that happen? They would have to beat the Hawks. They absolutely could do that. They would then have to beat either Adelaide or Collingwood. No problem with that at all. They would then have to beat the winner of Brisbane Geelong and then highly likely play the loser of Brisbane and Geelong. It would be a hell of a way to do it. Now, we know that Brisbane did it in a significant way as well last year, but you're thinking that they get the home game. Of course, they've either got to go to Adelaide or Melbourne. They've either then got to stay in Melbourne or then go to Brisbane and then go to Melbourne again. You'd kind of hope, travel-wise, that you'd go home against Hawthorn and then you play Collingwood and then you play Geelong and then you play Brisbane at the G. Like, in terms of the travel factor, that's the way to go. But if there's one team outside of Victoria that can acclimatise to travelling circa 1997 Adelaide, or 98 Adelaide, yeah, GWS are probably well equipped to do it. They play at a lot of grounds. Freo to make and win a prelim by under a goal. If that first A is not meant to be and Deza, I'm sorry that I'm not 100% sure what you're trying to type there. Love the specificity of this one, like under a kick. I like it. And then it comes to, of course, they've got to then win that. So I think that they're going to beat Gold Coast. I don't think there's nothing except for the on-field performance. But pre that game starting, unless Sarong, Hayden Young, and Josh Tracy are somehow late exclusions, then I just don't see a way that Gold Coast are going to get the job done there. I just don't. That's just where I stand on this. So, of course, that means that they would have to beat the loser of Brisbane Geelong and then win the prelim by under a kick. What an epic prelim that would be, by the way. Yeah, insane. But I like the specificity of it. That is a sick way to get the job done. So you're going at home to the Suns. You're then either going to Brisbane or Melbourne. You're then either staying in Melbourne or then going to Adelaide. That is a path to take for the 6th place side. No 6th place team has won the flag in the 21st century. Pretty crazy. Could they be the first? Who knows? Depending on the Geelong-Brisbane result, either Jasper Fletcher or Sean Manor will be the player of the final series. Hell yeah, dude. This is the thing that you live for. I love the picks for two different reasons. Now, I love the Jasper Fletcher pick because he would have to suit the Brisbane game style perfectly. Like, we know they want to rebound, he and Darcy Wilmot alongside Dane Zorko, of course. And you would think that Zorko would be the one that would have to move when Kitty Coleman comes back. So, like, he's just going to be a permanent fixture there. They're probably going to have Sam Marshall as a wingman for the majority of his career if he is to stay at Brisbane. So I like the fact that the run and dash there, I think he broke the record for most marks in a game by a Brisbane player, or the youngest to take a certain amount of marks in that game. That could have been against Freo, to be honest. But I love Jasper Fletcher. He is a gun, an absolute gun. And then for the offensive firepower that Sean Manor can bring, especially considering that you've got to try and stop Jezza, Shannon Neal, you then got to try and stop Brian Myers, Ollie Henry could cause a problem or two. Sean Manor being a 5th forward option is just bonkers. And I can absolutely see the logic there. Neither of those two guys would get tagged. Like, if you're going to do a defensive forward job, it would be on Zorko. If you're going to do a small forward tag, that smaller lockdown tag, it would have to be on Brian Myers, which means no matter what, these two are going to be open. Hell yeah, man. Tick, I love this take. Could be the take of the video. Gold Coast are going to go on a generational run to the prelim and then get belted by 10 goals. I love this take for a specific reason. If you're thinking, Daz, you've shat on Gold Coast for a lot of this video. The reason why I love this is the fact that it's generational run. So, of course, they're going to have to play 3 away games. That's the generational part of it, right? You got to go to Freo. Okay, maybe that second final is in Brisbane. So, you get the home state, it's at the Gabba instead of People's First Stadium. I don't think that's going to bother them too much, to be honest with you. But if you have to go Western Australia, Victoria against Geelong, hypothetically, and then Adelaide, probably, or you got to stay at the G again. That 3-week MCG run could help, circa the Giants example that I gave earlier. But I love how it's a generational run, and then it's someone in that final, I'm going to assume you mean Adelaide here, it's just going to belt the piss out of them, is great. This is why I love Hot Takes videos, because that's just awesome. The 25 premiers will come from the bottom half of the 8. The fact that you're a Geelong supporter and you've said this is like all the power to you. I don't even know if that's a proper sentence. Look, that helps me if that comes true, because that makes it a 1 in 4 chance that my team are going to win the flag. And, without sounding guilty, yes, please. Absolutely. If I honestly, though, were to go in terms of the paths that you have to go down, who do I think would be the most likely? I do think it is the winner of GWS and Hawthorn. That is no disrespect to Freo. I'm not trying to be disrespectful in that way. But I just think the momentum that's been able to be built, I think that it is a bigger task for GWS or Hawthorn in the semi. So if Freo have to come play Geelong, like, yeah, I'm down. I'm not sure they could beat Brisbane at home. I would give GWS and Hawthorn a better chance against Adelaide or Collingwood than I would give Freo against Brisbane. So of those 4 opportunities that you've got there, if we discount Gold Coast for a second, it's either would I rely on GWS beating Adelaide? Would I rely on Hawthorn beating Adelaide? Would I rely on GWS beating Collingwood? Would I rely on Hawthorn beating Collingwood? And then you've got Freo versus Geelong, Freo versus Brisbane. Freo v Brisbane is at the bottom of that list in terms of what I think might be likely. Now, Freo Geelong would sit probably pretty comfortably in the top 3 of that list, so there is a way that they could get that done. But by the power of numbers, I feel like this is a really boring answer. But I think it would be more likely to be either the Giants or the Hawks, and I'm trying to be unbiased about that. Do I think it's going to be a bottom half of the 8 team? No, I really don't. I think it is Brisbane's to lose, and I think Geelong can overtake them if they win the qualifying final. But I would honestly say that, like I do with the Premiership High, it's Brisbane, it's Geelong, and talk to me about the Crows after the qualifying final. I do think it's one of those 3. I really do. Last but not least, Cam Rayner and Riley Thilthorpe to kick 3 goals in a quarter in tight games. Well, Cam did rip the piss out of the final term. In the prelim final last year, I think, I may have been drunk and axe throwing at the time of that prelim final, which is not good. I would like to think that I'm good at a lot of things in this world. I'm bad at a lot of things too, by the way. DIY definitely being one of them, and drawing, can't draw. But axe throwing, I'm really shit at. But Cam Rayner just dominated there. The Riley Thilthorpe one I like, just ripping a game apart. I think against Collingwood's Talls, if Jeremy Howe's not fit to play, I think that is absolutely in play. I think Thriller could do 5 in the first half and just snuff the game away from the Pies. I could absolutely see that happening. And then Cam Rayner being that guy to break someone's heart in the last quarter of a big game. Yeah, I would totally get on board with this. If this was bettable, then, I had a $5 bonus bet or something, yeah, I would happily throw it on this, because that absolutely seems like something that could happen. So they're the hot takes, guys. I would love to know your thoughts. If you want a quick one from me, Max Michael and his job on Josh Dacos in the qualifying final between Adelaide and Collingwood will net him 7+ coaches votes. Take that to the bank, if you will. I hope you enjoyed. If you've got any ones that you want me to react to in the comments, go ahead and put those in. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe to join the Days Talks Footy family. Trying to hit 6K before the start of the finals. Looks relatively unlikely, but fingers are crossed. You can help me out. Go ahead and do that. I hope you're enjoying your week, guys. I have one more video before the finals start, and then I will be reacting to all of them. The Freo Gold Coast one is going to be late because the GWS Hawthorn one is going to have to be that night, because that's kind of how my Hawthorn content works. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video. Goodbye.